Hey Benji, how are you?
Hey Yakov, yeah, pretty good, thanks.
So a little early here. We'll see if we get some interested participants for the new agenda item. Unless people, I mean, we can always discuss future plans, but I'm not quite ready yet to present what I had been working on.
Yeah, fair enough.
Hello.
Hello, hello, welcome. So Dennis, I don't know if you saw my note on Discord. I took off the agenda item that I had put on in terms of a specific proposal that I had for moving forward with new package exports for GraphQL JS and potentially going ESM only. I had a great discussion, a very helpful to me discussion with Lens offline and I want to iterate a little bit more on the feedback you gave me on my initial proposal before presenting it. But there is another item on the agenda, and while we're here, obviously, I'm happy to talk about that. But we're just, talk about the initial effort that I made. But we're just waiting for, I guess, a quorum. Um, Yovi said that he wasn't feeling, was feeling under the weather, so he's probably not going to make it. And I know that Lens was giving me that feedback basically also in part because he didn't think he was going to be able to make this meeting in the end. So we're basically, I think, waiting for in terms of people who had signed up for Pablo and if I'm pronouncing this right, Yaden, or maybe it's Jaden.
Hayden.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Hello. Good, thank you.
Good. So I don't know if you heard that as well. There was another item. I'm Jakob. There was another item that we had. I initially wanted to present, but I got some feedback offline, and so I'm sort of going to iterate on that before I feel ready to present it. So your item is ready for discussion, and I guess we'll give it to since we only have one item, and I guess plenty of time. Hopefully, we'll give it to like 8:05. We're just waiting in terms of people signed up for Pablo who might want to join us.
Sure. My optimal JavaScript module design topic, I was particularly motivated to pitch this in this meeting because I saw your agenda item and they are quite deeply related conceptually.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I mean, what I was working on was a particular pull request, a particular code example, and I wanted to rework a few things. The ESM only discussion sort of intersects with how we have a development mode and how we use all that. So I'm not quite ready to present all of that. And but I understand how it's all kind of related. If you feel like you would like to defer, I mean, your own discussion until later, that's totally reasonable. But yours definitely seems quite well thought out. I read your blog post about it a while ago and found it very interesting slash compelling. I'd be happy for you to talk about it now or later as you would want. I'm just rambling a little to give
Sure.
Pablo a little bit more time to come.
No worries.
Okay, so it is 8:05, so I guess I'll as I said before, maybe before everyone signed on, Yobi told me passed along that he wasn't feeling so well, so I guess I'm the de facto host of this meeting of the GraphQL JS working group, the reference implementation for the GraphQL specification. So my first time doing it, so please jump in if you think I'm getting this boilerplate wrong. But by by showing up at this meeting, we all sort of acknowledge, or actually acknowledge, what's at the top of the agenda, which is the membership agreement, the participation and I guess contribution guidelines, and the code of conduct, with a particular call out to the fact that these meetings are recorded and published to YouTube, and there may be AI summary tools used to summarize the discussion. And that having said, um, we like to go around introducing ourselves. There aren't too many of us here, but we always like to put names to faces. So I'm Yaakov. I'm an independent contributor to the GraphQL JS repository, and one of the co-maintainers of it. We go typically in order of the names on the agenda item. So next would be Lens, who I think is not able to join us, and Pablo, who is also not here with us. And if anyone, I'm looking at if anyone, I guess this would be a call out to you, Benji, if you get a chance ever to I know you weren't sure whether you would be able to make it, but if you had a chance to send, I guess, in the pull request to put you in there. But I guess next is Dennis.
Hello, I'm Dennis from the Guild. I work in like GraphQL WS and SSC stuff, also part of the GraphQL over HTTP group.
Hello, I'm Jaden Serrick, GraphQL multi-part request spec author. I'm also the author of the GraphQL upload scaler that goes along with file uploads. And actually, a really long time ago, I was involved in some of the first GitHub issues and pull requests uh, with Lee Byron, I think, in GraphQL JS about supporting ESM ages and ages ago. Um,
Hey folks, I'm Benji. I'm just going to be mostly on mute today because I'm cooking. Um, but yeah, I'm a TSC member and just interested to see what's going on.
Okay, so fantastic. So we usually, let's see, what's on our boilerplate? We usually ask for volunteers for note taking. That's the boilerplate at least. I have to see if I can if I can find where exactly we take our notes, actually, because
It
I'm not.
should be a link in the agenda.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
normally it's a continuous
There
document,
is.
so you
Yeah.
should be the
Yeah.
same one each time.
Yeah. So there is a link. You definitely, as Benji said, there is a link in the agenda, and we just have to scroll all the way down. And if anyone's able to help us out with that, especially especially those who are not speaking, can add on while other people are, just that we have a somewhat permanent record of this. And I'm just looking.
Just to answer Dennis in the chat, we do now have AI that will summarize. It's the Zoom AI which will summarize the calls for us, but it's not always like 100%. So if there's things that you are discussing that you know that the AI is likely not going to recognize, or especially if you're discussing things like code and specific method names, it's worth jotting those down in the manual human taken notes so that they can be used alongside the AI ones.
Let's see. If I understand this right, this is in reverse chronological order, I think. Um, yeah, create a new header at the top of the file. Okay, great. So I'll get started with that in the background. And then we basically would review review our agenda. So we have the one agenda item, Jaden's item to discuss, if you would like to, and obviously it relates to what I had, a move to ESM or CGS fallback with conditional exports and how exactly to export. So just to give like a one-liner, I had been working on a pull request to actually provide the code to change our build scripts to do that. It interfaces both with moving to ESM only and how could we provide a CGS fallback. The current, if we would want to, the current motivation to finally get this done is basically because Node has released support for requiring ESM modules that are synchronous only, that don't use top level await in basically all the levels in all the current versions of Node. And so this would hopefully lead to, I guess, more frictionless adoption of ESM by the entire, JavaScript community or Node community. And so now it seems like a good time to do this. And so to finally do this, I mean, it could have been a long time ago as well, as many people have been moving much earlier. But and it relates to some earlier pull requests we were working about getting our changing of the way our extra development mode checks works. So I got some great feedback from this offline from Lens, who wasn't able to make this meeting, and I want to iterate on that before actually presenting what I was doing. But as Jaden said, it relates to basically how best we might want to package things. And if Jaden, that's my segue to basically giving you the floor to discuss your topic, if that's okay.
Awesome. I'll see if I can share my screen. Stop two. Cool. So basically, has everyone here read this article before, or is familiar with this topic? Um, Basically, I've put my thoughts down into one article about the most optimal way to structure your imports and your exports and the files of your modules in a JavaScript project, and what how the benefits come out. It can make bundling a lot better. It can mean that you're caching a lot less files when you're running things in Deno with HTTP imports. It can mean when you're actually using JavaScript ESM in the client, in browser and web apps without bundling, it can significantly reduce the waterfalls and all the different things that get pulled in. So I won't go now blow by blow through the full argument for why barrel files are an anti-pattern, why index modules are an anti-pattern, and why this is the optimal way to do things. But to summarize basically the proposal, every JavaScript module should have a single export in it. And there shouldn't be basically modules that have lots of named exports in it. It is okay to have one export in a module that is a named export. It doesn't technically matter so much if you have one default export or if you have one named export, but for slightly better minification for people who do bundle or minify, named default imports minify basically to like one letter character, and you don't have to like alias. You don't have to alias the full named import. So it's slightly more optimal to use a default. So where that is particularly relevant to GraphQL. So if we go straight to like the documentation for the basic types and things. So if we were trying to do this in Deno, so I do all my back end stuff now in Deno, and I do all my front end React GraphQL powered web apps, build lists with native ESM, and Ruck is my application framework. So if this was in the Deno backend, this would end up caching the entirety of every module that is in the GraphQL JS library. It'll pull everything in. And that is completely unnecessary for our server to download all of that over network, cache all of that to the disk, basically having to pass all of that, run that. So what I suggest, so if we look at the structure of the modules and how they actually are published, here in unpackage for current GraphQL JS, this is the module that's holding the scalars. So there's, for example, if our backend is only using the int scalar and none of the other ones, because all of the scalars are published in one file, it's impossible for us to optimally deep import just this scalar without our runtime parsing and downloading all of this other code. So my suggestions for GraphQL JS is, firstly, we pull out every publicly exported entity in the API into its own separate module. So I would suggest we'd have something like scalar / and then I always name my modules by what the name of the entity being exported is, with the same capitalization, everything. So that would allow authors to basically be able to get just the things that they need. Now, I also suggest now why deep imports were kind of a little bit possible with the old GraphQL JS library, but why in actual commercial projects or published things I wouldn't. So sorry, I've just zoned out. It's 3 a.m. I set an alarm to wake up for this. Yeah, so in the package, where's this one here? Yeah, so the way it's currently published, and this is relating to Yakov, what you were originally going to talk about. So the way that Bundler is now, to get either the common JS or the ESM version of GraphQL JS, it comes back to this main entry point. So this only works if you are importing things directly from the bare specifier. So as soon as you start deep importing stuff, you're forcibly only ever going to get common JS. So I myself, like in my GraphQL upload scalar and things like that, I've sort of flip-flopped between attempting to try and reach deep into the GraphQL JS package, and then that causes all sort of dual, ESM CJS bundling issues and things. And it, like, as an ecosystem, it's not really great if half of the people are trying to import from the ESM code, and then other dependencies are trying to reach into the common JS. So, but once we are pure ESM, and I am 100,000% on board with that, for many different reasons, I guess we'll discuss when that agenda item's back on. This is definitely 1,000%. There is no valid use case to importing things from the main entry point. It's definitely an anti-pattern. It will always, in every situation, be more optimal to deep import just the thing you need. So I suggest, because I guess that the natural inclination people will probably have as we go about implementing pure ESM is to try to like make the upgrade path from the old package like less friction, and to keep like this a similar like main package index and keep all the similar exports and stuff available this way. But I really, really, really hope that if we are going to publish a major version, um, that we can avoid that contagion. Because if I'm really a diligent ecosystem member and I publish my scalar, deep importing optimally only the things that I need to construct my custom scalar and publish that. Uh, and in my app, I use import deeply just the modules in that part of the dependency graph, say, for example, my GraphQL upload scalar, but then I install a dependency from someone else that has some other kind of scalar or some other thing in the GraphQL ecosystem, and they're doing it this way. Suddenly, all my optimization efforts of carefully deep importing just the things that I need in my dependencies in my project code are all completely pointless, because one dependency does it this way. It's going to pull in every single module. So people aren't really acutely aware of how uh, undesirable this is when they've got a build step, and they've got tree shaking and stuff like that. And they just don't really notice the consequence of this, because that kind of gets abstracted away in the build bundling process. But when you are actually using GraphQL JS in the browser with actual ESM, which I hope when we publish pure ESM artifacts, people will and will be able to. Um, this is going to be the worst nightmare of anyone that's actually trying to use ESM without a build step. It just takes one person that will do things the sort of lazy way and publish a dependency, and then you're stuck. So my second proposal, if we look at the agenda, um, is that we actually remove the main index modules, and also any sort of deep imports that contain a barrel, like a bunch of other stuff as well. So if we've got like all of our scalars available kind of in if we end up having a slash scalars that has just all the scalars in it, yeah, that's slightly better than a import from the main package that has everything. It'll just then pull in the scalars. But it's I think we're much better off deleting the main entry point in our package JSON, not even offering the foot gun to the community and the ecosystem. And then that will guarantee that anything anyone's publishing that imports from GraphQL JS is going to be safe to use. It'll basically force people to correctly deep import things. There's no valid use case or technical reason to be importing it from the bare specifier once they're a pure ESM modules published. Is there any sort of comments or questions about these points?
I have one. So
Yep.
yeah, I only like read over your blog post, didn't go into it thoroughly. I generally like the idea and agree with all of the points you made there, especially when it comes to the browser. But when it comes to like GraphQL, it's more of a question. Do you suggest that having one export per file is a rule of thumb, or is something that you would like really strictly follow? Because GraphQL itself has around 200 exports, which means that we will have a lot of files after if this we decide to migrate to follow this pattern. And also, like, if you put all of the exports in separate files, meaning one file, one export, if you end up
Mhm.
importing a module that imports a lot of other modules, you would then create a waterfall effect. Or am I not understanding this correctly? So this is like the main question, and then we can like discuss other things.
Yeah, sure. So if you were to import, let's imagine that this is in the future when there are pure ESM modules behind this. So uh, the way Dino, for example, would be able to cache that or get to this actual code at the run in the runtime, it would have to first uh, download the index module, um, and then the browser or Dino would then have a waterfall to try and download whatever sub indexes for scalars, for validators, whatever. That all gets loaded in. And then finally, it'll probably have a third waterfall step where it'll actually get this from wherever the build schema code comes from. So if you were to instead just have GraphQL and then go slash build schema.mjs and have a deep import directly to that, there's no waterfall. Your browser or Dino will immediately cache just the thing it needs without any waterfall loading. So it'll be vastly more performant.
Yeah. But
Um,
imagine build schema importing all of the scalars because it needs to instantiate them for whatever reason. So currently we have all of the, for example, we have all of the scalars in one file, and
mhm,
hypothetically, let's say build schema only imports all of the scalars. With the import of build schema, you would have two requests, one for the build schema itself and one for the scalars. But now, if we
mhm.
split the scalars to, let's say, 10 different files that each have a specific scalar they export, the build schema would then result in 10 plus 1 imports or requests in order to acquire all of the things. Uh, my question is like, of course, there's this benefit that you're importing just the build schema. I completely agree on that point. I'm just discussing the rigidness of having one file per export, whether that like makes generally sense, or do you sometimes circumvent that by having both like scalars forward slash index, and then inside of that folder you can flatten out all of the other scalars that it exports, and then you can basically decide whether you want to import all of them through one file or through multiple files, but would that lead to duplication?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I have a ESLint plugin published called like Optimal Module Design, something like that. It's linked in the article um, somewhere. Uh,
So,
so it
ignoring the, yeah,
yeah.
there.
So it basically create gives a really nice sort of DX if you're not importing a deep import, or if you're exporting a bunch of named imports, it'll have like a relevant message to say, don't do that. Here's the reason why. Um, so I've actually enforced strictly, firstly in all of my open source packages. One export per module, like no matter what. And there are very edge case things to do with, like, say, if you've got a Next.js project and the API convention is that there's like a named export for data fetching or something like that, where you're forced by the pattern of that framework to have extra, in which case I ESLint ignore my rule in my projects in those files. Um, but I've also enforced this lint rule in enterprise projects before with thousands of modules, and it actually made the project significantly more navigatable and a lot less confusing. It actually reduces the files in some ways as well, because you don't have so much like index modules flying around. So uh, long story short, it's actually been a breath of fresh air as far as like the maintenance and the developer experience, being able to just have a single file for each thing.
Yeah, I think you are missing my question. So if you have build schema import each of the scalars files, you have 11 imports given that there is 10 scalars that the build schema imports. Uh,
Hmm.
Also, like the execute function, which would theoretically need everything that GraphQL has to offer, if we decide to have one file per export, then just importing execute would create a huge waterfall effect of many files that need importing.
So that waterfall though happens asynchronously in parallel. So I think I understand now better th- your the main meaning you're getting at with your question. There's just simply going to be more files. So if you like you say, if you try and import something complex that you composes a bunch of other modules, you're just going to end up getting more network activity in general. Um, Yes, but that is vastly preferable, and all of those happen in parallel.
The question is more about the optimization. If you are going to end up with, I don't know, a 500 line uh, file that contains all of the scalars and you can get all of them in one sweep and you often would need all of them at once, wouldn't that be more optimal than having each of them in separate files where each file has 100 megabyte 100 lines? We're talking about saving not kilobytes but even less maybe if properly compressed. I'm just talking about the rigidness. So I
Mm.
understand your point. I just don't think that we necessarily have to change the layout of the project because that's a huge endeavor to have a single file for a single export. I also don't find it intuitive. I mean, you get to this file and you have to the scalars file and you have all of the scalars there. So it's for me personally, it's a matter of opinion. So it's subjective. I find it more easily navigatable when there is like a logic separation instead of export separation of uh, uh, of modules. It would also like increase the complexity of migration. um, I'm also thinking about like whether we can automate this. Can we have some build step on our side that does this separation in case you really want to use that side, where ideally something would compile all of this and create separate files for each of the exports, and then we satisfy both of the worlds. But then the question is like whether it's worth the effort. We don't have to answer this now. I'm just expressing
Mm.
my opinions about this, so something worth discussing before we make a final decision on this.
Yeah, so I have experience refactoring suboptimal code over hundreds of modules and creating new files, splitting them out. Really, the first step is to put the linter in, and then you've just got a big list to just go through. Um, Maybe there's some ways you could automate some things, but in the end, honestly, it'll take less than an hour to just manually create all the files. I don't think it's particularly difficult.
Yeah. I don't know, like for example, the scalars has a function that's private that each of the scalars use, so you would have to create an extra file to. So I don't think it's just like you sit down and you just create files for each of the exports. I think you also have to consider the union of private exports, private imports that all of those need. Also, another thing I want to ask is this is mainly a problem of the browser, so ideally you want.
It's a problem of bundlers. So if the bundler has to do a lot of work to tree shake and optimize modules that have a bunch of stuff in it, that works. It has to work harder for IntelliSense and things. If you are using just one thing um, it has to it has to parse all of the code that's behind this. Um, so for Dino, on servers, it's got to cache everything. That actually measurably slows down how fast deployments and things are. Um, and uh, I don't think that we should trivialize how important it is that we're building for the future in the browser, because there are relevant things in the front end for using GraphQL JS. And as soon as you actually attempt to do it, you're going to say that it's basically unworkable unless GraphQL offers deep imports. Um,
Yeah, on that
yeah.
side, I completely understand and agree. But we also have two sort of worlds, two kinds of two categories of developers that we're covering: those that use GraphQL to build apps, and those that use GraphQL to build libraries. If you are using GraphQL to build libraries, you're often faced with needing everything that GraphQL has to offer and having a single. So now we go to the next topic, and that is dropping the main package properly in the package JSON.
Mhm.
So if we decide to leave it in, we get this benefit where you can use import X from GraphQL uh, and import Y to everything you need basically, and the process would then just parse or cache GraphQL once instead of each of the specific imports that you're making. So there is still an argument to be made that we might want to keep the main field there, but have an opt-in where people that use it in the browser or people that want this uh, tree shakeability, they use each of the exports like you showing here.
Yeah, so just to make the point that when you do have the package exports field, um, your like editor IntelliSense and auto imports and things like that can all work just as easily for the developer experience if you're using VS Code or something like that. Like it's able to auto import all these things if you just start referencing that in code, and it'll do the deep import with the proper path and everything. Um,
Maybe uh, I placed my words incorrectly. I was just talking about the index module, not necessarily whether it's the main field in package JSON or whether it's a module or whatnot. So exports dash forward slash and then the index module. I'm in favor of leaving it in and having all of these options, all of these other exports that we will have as like opt-in. So if you
mm.
have the need to use GraphQL in the browser, you would then ideally want to use specific imports for each of the modules that you need. And we can extensively document and recommend that all around so that we press the issue to users needing this feature. But when you are a
So
library author, it's useful to have everything at once. And then basically, if you're using Dino or Node or whatever, and you have an import from GraphQL, the processing of the GraphQL module happens once anyways. So yeah, you you might already need everything that GraphQL has to offer.
So if we're kind of like at a fork in the road in history. So if we have pure ESM modules, and let's imagine that we make them deep importable, so we do actually optimize the structure at least of the artifacts in GraphQL package, but we continue to offer a main entry point so people can just do imports like this. I guarantee that especially if somewhere in documentation there are examples like this. But even if we make them all deep imports and all the documentation examples, um, as if we give people the rope to hang themselves, I guarantee 99% of the ecosystem is just going to do this lazy way of just doing it from the bare specifier. And people like me that are trying to make apps using ESM, we're just going to be stuffed, because even if GraphQL JS provides us the ability to deep import some things, 99% of the ecosystem is going to do it incorrectly, to the point where we're forced to have a bundler because like we're not able to use any of the packages in the ecosystem. So I can guarantee that that is almost certainly going to happen. If we don't have a main entry point and people are forced to deep import, basically that everyone's going to fall into the pit of success. Every single um, private project and every published package that uses GraphQL JS will be perfectly optimal, and there won't be a minefield. When you're looking on npm, you're not going to have to like go into unpackage and try and reverse engineer how they're doing imports and try and figure out, is this going to be a contagion in my Dino server or in my browser? Um, there's really like no valid reason, once those modules are deep importable, there's no valid reason in any documentation, any private code, any public code, not published, Node, Dino, there's no valid reason for importing it this way. So I think we shouldn't even offer the ecosystem the ability.
Hi. If I may speak for a moment, I think anyone who has had to solve this problem that you described, like to reduce bundle size, like had to go in and edit their node modules and patch a dependency that imports the whole of Lodash for one function, you can definitely feel this pain. And I definitely understand the motivation behind it and definitely sympathize with it. That said, there are disadvantages to doing this approach as well. One of them is discoverability. So, like you say, if you know what the name of something is, you can absolutely type that, and your editor, assuming that you've got like decent autocomplete in it, which most editors have now, will auto import it from the right path, which is great. But one of the things that you can do with a barrel file is you can do import curly braces from GraphQL. You can go into those curly braces and you can do control space and see a list of the things that are available to import from that, which is particularly useful if you can't remember what the imports are. It's also useful if you just, there's a thing there, but you can't quite remember what it is right now, and you just, auto complete it. Obviously, this is solvable with documentation, but it takes you out of your editor and to a website to then look up those methods. So do you have a particular pattern that offsets this pain a little bit?
So we just have a bias because we're used to typing in the named part the word we're curious about and seeing if it exists. But if we have a pattern where everything has its name as the file name, as a deep import, you can do slash and then start typing if you're looking for a GraphQL int scalar or something, like, and you'll start getting suggestions for deep imports that match that. I mean, it's really not a particularly different DX, but I would argue that for something like GraphQL JS, where it's such a foundational glue to an ecosystem, where like to a lot of normies who need the crutch of discoverability and these sorts of things, they're probably not directly, importing from the guts and gizzards of GraphQL JS in their code. They're probably getting these things via abstractions in their frameworks and stuff like that. I think that we really need to be optimizing for GraphQL JS to be a really reliable glue to an ecosystem of packages. That's my main concern.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one of the other benefits that you get from importing it on the path basis with autocomplete is that you get effectively a tree style of browsing, though it does mean that finding individual things means you need to know where it is in the tree. So it's a little bit of a trade-off, and it's a little bit of a decision when it comes to how do you format that tree, where do you put things. There's also the concern of, if we push out V17 as ESM only, that's already a massive change that we would be proposing. And there's a lot of tooling that would need to be updated to support it. So like the latest versions of Jest support ESM somewhat, but like if people can't upgrade to those for various reasons, that's already a huge shift. If we're adding on to that, that you also need to rewrite all of your imports from GraphQL to be, hundreds of lines. Well, I suppose there's still going to be the same number of lines, but like lots of singular import statements turned into lots of other ones. That may also be a pain. I think that can be offset by like JS Code Shift and other things like that. But I just, it's something we should go into with our eyes open and be aware of what the impact is on our users.
Yeah, it's just the sort of thing where there's no way around it. Like, if we want this to be usable in browsers, where we have to kind of do it in this new structure. And it's sort of like a decision between making things convenient for the common JS sort of tangled ecosystem that we have now, or like, yeah, like it's at some point we have to rip the band-aid off. And I think that the cleanest, least disruptive way is at the same moment that we go to pure ESM. Um, if we published in the next major version the exact same import structure, but just with pure ESM, and then in a major version followed up after that a month or two later, we had we deleted the main entry points. I don't think it's going to reduce the amount of friction in people migrating, because if all of their code stays the same with that intermediate major version release, what's it really giving people? Um, yeah, I think this
Well,
we're sort of segueing into the other agenda item that,
Yeah,
but yeah.
that's well. So one thing is that we hope. I mean, I found that incredibly appealing. The scenario you described in which we switched to ESM only and no one essentially noticed. That I guess would be the ideal. That no code changes were required. Um, I think we are anticipating, despite the fact that require ESM support is has been released, that despite all that, there will be some friction. In particular, like Benji said, in terms of jest support. I added some integration tests, which shows that yes, indeed, it is still a problem. And I put in the chat a scheme that I was talking about with Lens. If we choose to still retain a CJS fallback, that would basically give, I think, ESM to everybody except Jest and people who really don't want it. Um, but I sympathize. I definitely sympathize with the idea of now that there's momentum, we should try to capitalize on it. But I do wonder if you think if you really do think that it would only take a couple hours. I just envision for myself trying to accomplish this, and I feel like it would take me much longer. So
Hmm.
um, I'm not sure if this is something you would want to work on in the absence of a clear a clear view from here that we would accept it. I guess it depends really if you do think that it would take so short.
Yeah, I've got a sort of a circle of friends that are really into the buildless, way of doing things, and I've also got some friends that use GraphQL JS like commercially in their APIs in the Australian time zone, and they were all really invested in my pitch tonight, and but they can't wake up at 3 a.m. like I can, so I can probably rope assistance in with other people that are deeply intimate with these topics, who have been waiting for a long time to be able to deep import from GraphQL JS. So I don't foresee it as being a huge problem in finding contribution, because it's a remarkably easy thing to conceptually explain as far as the scope of the task, and what needs to happen. If we did end up having like an intermediate, like pure ESM only, but maintaining the same API for the imports, I would still probably make everything optimal in our package, but then add a few extra index modules that just retain and the original barrel files so that people don't need a code change. But under the hood, we could still structure everything out into separate modules. Um,
I mean, I think you're seeing that there is some reasons that people express and some hesitancy. I think of this idea, despite the fact that I think everyone's agreed that overall it's compelling. And so the question that I have, I mean, it's always I think in my very limited experience with this is open source development. I mean, it's always a little bit frustrating for people to have an idea and then people to say, well, I'm not so sure how that'll work out. Can you give me an example of what it would see? And then, well, I don't necessarily want to work on it unless I'm sure that something will come of it. I find that I put a lot of time into PRs that aren't accepted, and sometimes I'm extremely frustrated by that, and sometimes I really enjoy the experience and really feel like I really proved the point, so to speak, with the code. The code spoke better than words. So I'm not sure if you think that you and the people your compatriots who are enamored of this would be interested in like an actual PR to show what it would look like in the absence, I mean, of a clear sense of when it would land. But that's, I guess, the question that I'm putting to you. Do you think you would want to work on it already? Like you said, with things in the, sort of hiding it and just showing the underlying layers there, because there has been some hesitancy even, on this call, just in terms of, the overall organization, just into, to where to find everything, not necessarily the developer using things discovery, but like, us maintainers like being able to find everything in the repository with so many files. So I don't want to speak for everyone, care to say that we're, one way or the other on whether it would be accepted. But the question is, how do we move forward? Would it make sense to move forward with an actual PR, or would you want to get more buy-in first?
so two logistical challenges to actioning this. Uh, firstly, the arbitrary decisions. So for my projects, GraphQL upload GitHub. So I have a uniform pattern for everything where I offer all of the public exported modules just straight in the root of the package. So for GraphQL JS, though, where there's hundreds of things that publicly exported modules, we probably will want the directory structure that is complete non-technical in purpose. It's just a way of just grouping the modules. So I suppose if we decided we wanted to group them uh, like matching the existing way where we've got like these folders like this, uh, then there's less logistical like discussion about the arbitrary grouping of things into folders. Um, but I do wonder, though, if we were really serious about doing this, we'd kind of want to have the ideal directory structure once, so we don't have the drama of moving or renaming a significant number of different modules. That can be quite annoying if you get PR feedback and or people flip flop on that. Logistically, it would be really beneficial if we could agree on what we think the ideal arbitrary directory structure would be. Um, and it might be different to how it currently is. But the second logistical problem is that if I raise a PR, it's going to affect literally every module in the code base. So I really, really, really don't want to have to rebase if other PRs and contributions keep trickling in after I've done the big rename. So it's the sort of thing that you really want buy-in, and then you want sort of all hands on deck to just start migrating things according to the agreed pattern. You could even have multiple contributors pushing to the same PR until everything's done. There's no more lint errors about multiple named exports. Um, and, you know, then you're not going to have a ridiculous merge conflicts. So like someone's going to be inconvenienced. Like if we look at the uh, GraphQL JS. Let's look at the open PRs. So there's 70. All of these are going to be completely conflicted if we merge to main branch, a big folder restructuring. So any of these that want to stay alive, they're going to have to try and migrate their PRs to the new structure. If some of these get merged while I've raised that PR, then it's very tricky for me to try to rebase after I've moved files around. It's a nightmare. I've done this in enterprise code bases and this type of situation. We've just agreed to lock PRs and to do the file renaming and moving and then sort of start merging things again after.
Yeah, as you describe it, I'm seeing that. I'm just imagining it, and it sounds pretty awful. That leads me to ask another question. So it sounds like we would have to think of the quote unquote optimal organizational structure, but it sounds like then we're sort of locked into our public facing API at least would be sort of locked into that. If we want to reorganize anything, sort of to make development easier or as it changes, then sort of changing any folder structure, even changing any file name, the internal ones uh, well, not the internal ones, but becomes quite a bigger deal. Um,
So you
not
do
sure. I'm
have
not sure that that's true. Actually, trying to think through it, but I'm just wondering if this will cause more friction in terms of more numerous breaking changes later. I guess not. I mean, if the file names are the same as a function name and it corresponds to the file name, so I guess that's not quite an issue. Um,
uh, So you do have the technical ability in the Node.js world to alias things. So for example, in package exports, you could have something that's called validation, and then it has a bunch of nested modules under that directory. And then later on, you decide, oh, we want to offer the exact same modules at a better name, and we want to call it validators instead now. And you can actually map one name of the import to a different physical directory, and you could even allow both for a migration period and then like delete the old one. Theoretically, you could create a whole pseudo directory structure in the package exports that doesn't match the actual file structure at all. So in theory, you could have a soup and just have like slash modules and then just have every single GraphQL JS module flat and then create some sort of directory abstraction structure here in the package exports and people wouldn't notice. But I would really, really advise against creating a discrepancy between the directory structure in the package's exports definition getting out of whack with the physical directory structure. And that's because certain CDNs and things where they, like, if you just go in here and you just start typing directly, scalars and then GraphQL int, .mjs, like some of these CDNs are just dumb where they just statically host all of those modules and they don't like take this path and then run it through some runtime code that looks up what does that correlate to in the real directory underlying structure. Some CDNs have been updated to do that now. I think if I recall, Unpackaged might have been messing around in the last year with this. I'm not sure if they've implemented it yet, but for years and years and years, Unpackaged just dumbly served files. So if you were to, where were we? I've lost it now, but where the package exports was, um, if you were to re-alias things and create all these alternative ways of importing things that only exist in configuration for Node.js, I really strongly advise against it just because you end up with alternate realities for people using Node.
Yeah.
Can I share my screen just for a second? Let me find that thing here. It's not showing me. Yeah, I'll just share like this. Oh, I have to grant access. I have to reopen Zoom, so give me a second.
No worries.
Hello, I'm back. So here it is. You can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so just to add to the point that I made previously, I found this cool app, Library Mage, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, which basically is just a dependency graph thing. And
Hmm.
I ran it on the execute, which is the most commonly used function that you would need from GraphQL to get like all of the imports, and it's processing 49 files. And this is the count of their imports, and if we sum all of these up, it's around 140. I have it on some other screen. So if we decide to put an export per file, just importing execute would end up importing 140 files, which is even over like HTTP and over network, a lot of files. And if you import more, so validate imports 84 files, building schema imports 91 files, and if we flat out all of the uh, imports here, so that are performed by each of the files, we quickly get to a huge, obnoxious number of files, adding to the argument of not really having the logical separation of one file per export. I personally would prefer to have it as it is. I think the way we structured files in GraphQL follows some logic, some like unit of work, unit of modules that you would need. I personally like that. Uh, Another point that I would like to add is the point about not having the index export. Uh, I sort of agree with the point that you're making, Jaden, and that is like you are pretty much forcing a hand on all of the users to use the proper approach to have a more tree shakeable, less work importing performance of GraphQL. So I'm on the edge there. We're sort of sacrificing developer experience, requiring huge migration steps to everything. We also have to remember that sometimes GraphQL is a peer dependency, and this would mean that switching abruptly to this form of import without having the index file would mean that all of the dependencies that also depend on GraphQL have to be migrated to support the latest version. And it also means that it would not be backwards compatible. So basically, once you go, what is it, 17 plus, you're fully 17 plus, not going back and not supporting anything else before. So there is also an argument to be made to keep the index file, but I think that's up for discussion. It's only this that I mean, not worrying about. It's just that it seems like importing 140 files to get just execute running over 50 with the current structure would be sort of an overkill.
So assuming that this is in the context of a node, back in GraphQL API project, what is your concern if the npm like is importing in node modules 140 files instead of 49?
Talking about browsers, so we're doing the optimization mostly for the browser. Yes, it would result to more disk calls, IO operations, but that's really not a worry when it comes to like
Mm.
the places where you would run Node. But when it comes to the browser, this one would be making 140 requests, which, yeah, even if parallel,
But
is that a lot or not?
uh, it's still preferable than having
Okay.
every yeah. I am skeptical that really does execute really use like all of those things. Um, because if we restructure things as well, once you're in the mindset of only importing things in the moment that they're necessary, uh, like making the code base more composable instead of like having a class with a bunch of methods and having things functional with separate modules and like I I would be surprised if we really typically encounter situations like this.
Um, so maybe if we structure it differently, it would be different, but these numbers here are the amount of imports that each of the files is making. So if execute imports 19 files, one of them is definition, which itself imports 16 modules. So not files, 16 modules, 10 modules, stuff like that. So making a file per export would amount up to the sum of all of these to perform an import. But you're better knowing in the browser world whether 140 requests for, I mean, this is just a quick calculation. This might be completely incorrect when we do the refactoring. So it might even get reduced if it needs, even though I don't know, maybe not.
Mhm.
But when it comes to the browser, is making 140 requests okay in parallel to resolve a module, or would that be
Uh,
considered a lot?
I think it might be helpful if I'll share my screen and demonstrate.
Yeah,
Share,
I'll stop my share in a moment. There it is.
share, uh, desktop two. There we go. I'll actually use Chrome for this. I normally prefer Safari and less DevTools. So if I go to like let's go to the GraphQL JS website just for an example. Uh, I don't know this one. And there is a tool in here called Coverage, and you can filter it to just JavaScript as well. Uh, I'll try and dock this. So when you're looking at this visualization here of this chart, uh, most of this code uh, is unused. So 57% of all of these bytes is not even used. And like if you go to even something like a Next.js website, like if you go to Vercel, uh, even their own websites have got like 93% of this code is not hot. It's not used. So if we go instead to say like my own website, and we look at the coverage in here, uh, start recording, refresh. Uh, so like all of these. modules that you see at the bottom, 0% of them are unused because my application, I know for surety that if I go to a given route, 100% of this code is hot. It's necessary. It's being taken over the network because it is part of the critical like function of this page. It's going to be used. Like at the top, this is React DOM, and it's shafting me because they have suboptimal module design. So like, if my app doesn't use all of the hooks and things, it's going to download it all anyway. And as you start like navigating around, um, like you might get a few extra things, but like you're not going to like download bundles for the separate routes that include the same dependencies multiple times in the different bundles. So you pay a little bit of an upfront cost, but it's not that bad because it's not a waterfall. They're all flat. And as you can see here, how many modules are we up to now? It'd be nice if they had a little count. There could easily be 100 here, but like you don't actually notice it as a user. You notice actually that just clicking around, things seem as fast or faster than even like, Next.js type websites. So, and this is in a web browser, which is like the worst case scenario for like network and things. So this is the way that JavaScript and ES modules were intended and designed to work. Like this is the web functioning as it was intended to. So like I don't think we should be scared of like if all of these modules are actually necessary, especially if it's served over HTTP2. If it's 50 files that are downloading in parallel from the same server, um, it's not really a scary thing. Um, but the end result is just a lot more optimal. If I was to use GraphQL JS to, I don't know, parse something and have like a little demo box where you can have a little playground or something like that, I guarantee you there would just be a monster, megabyte of code that would be bundled, and probably a huge portion of it wouldn't be hot. And if I was to try to you know, make a build list one. Um, if you did it, yeah, basically I can't see a way around it. Once you try and build things for build list in the client, you kind of want everything in its own module. Um, I'll
Yeah.
stop sharing.
Yeah. That looks good. It was more of a question, like whether you, as someone who has spent time using buildless and facing scenarios where you have to, in parallel, import a bunch of files, whether that is something you personally would consider suboptimal. Uh, I don't know. So it's more of
Mm.
something like I'm just putting it there on the table to be up for a discussion. But yeah, I'm all in favor of modernizing the stack. So that's something I'm excited to see. And yeah, thank you, Jaden, for like waking up at 3 a.m. and sorry for bombarding you with questions. But it's an interesting discussion nevertheless.
So, Jaden, I think I want to echo that. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. It's such an hour for you. Um, I do think I feel like I've besides reading your blog post, I feel like you've made somewhere on the GraphQL JS surface you've put in this suggestion, but I'm just wondering in terms of next steps. We would probably want to gather buy-in from everybody working on like active PRs, like as you said, it will require like maybe locking down the code base and so forth. So I'm wondering in terms of next steps, it might be to make that more visible and like pinging all the people who have work pending and seeing how this would impact them. I guess to try to figure out the best timing. That's my thought. Do you have any thoughts as to? I mean, we're kind of over already on time. So do you have any
Yep.
thoughts in
Uh,
terms of how to just make sure that that we don't just say that sounds very compelling, but also think about its actionability.
How feasible do you guys think it is that we can progress the important pull requests that are open and sort of get to a point where we don't have really critical or complex pull requests that are open before we do this? There's 70 that are open now, but maybe a lot of them are dead.
Well, some of them might be dead. Oh, so orphaned, you could say is another term, meaning their contributors may have moved on. They may be quite old. Some of them reflect, I believe, a specification pull requests, and those tend to be long-lived because they tend to go through. I mean, some of them do. Well, to varying degrees. Some of them tend to be long-lived because of the specification process itself. And some of them are kept around sort of as there may be some cleanup we would need to do. We could close some of them maybe if they're not being active and tell the people that they could always be reopened but might require a major rebase. So I think that itself would be some I guess the first task to get like an assessment of what those old pull requests are. Um, and I think that's a good, a good maybe thing to do. I'm just thinking out loud might be to get an issue and, how to put this into action. What would we need to do? We would need to, make sure that the maintainers, Yovi for in particular has, who wasn't able to join us, had, we have buy-in about this idea from, and then to try to figure out what the blockers are. And I guess the existing PRs there might be some sub issues like who's willing to donate some time to go through all of them and maybe categorize them and try to figure out which ones we actually won't be able to get rid of, but we need to be able to continue to rebase. So that is I guess one tricky part of our special production code, but also specification repository. So maybe the next step might be to just create an issue where we could, or a discussion where we could try to figure out like asynchronously all the stuff that we need to figure out in order to make this happen. Would that make sense?
So do we want tracking issues for pure ESM and optimal module design like separately, or do we just know between ourselves that this is a direction of work and we don't go to the effort of raising an issue, documenting everything and like
I think we kind of
because
do. I think we kind of do need to raise an issue because most of us who work on this repository work on it on a volunteer basis, and so that means that as enthusiastic as we are at times, it's very availability dependent. And so I think we probably need to document it somewhere that it's something we're working on, and
Mhm.
just in case, just because if it's decided between us, but then I, for example, am suddenly unavailable, or somebody else who's been donating time is suddenly unavailable, it becomes much less clear what the direction overall is, and that's probably a problem within our repository in general, that we have sort of a direction that we want to go into ESM, but some organizational difficulties based on the availability of it. And we're trying to fix that and to put in new energy into moving forward, and that's what the ESM code is about. But I think we do in terms of this change, which is going to be a large refactor. I think we're going to need to work asynchronously in some manner, and I think the
Mhm.
Discord in this meeting would be probably helped out by something on like an issue or a discussion. Or I mean, if you had a pull request where we just got started, that you wanted to just demonstrate like what this would look like for one file, like to me, it doesn't matter like where on the GitHub surface we address this, but like we should probably just make sure to put something up there, so it makes clear that we are working on it. And that might surface some additional comments. So I wouldn't
Uh,
say, yeah, that's my thought.
So action item on myself, I'll raise an issue. I'll articulate very clearly um, the proposals. I'll separate them out into sort of a scale of controversy for deleting the index modules and things. And I will probably also capture in there sort of the next steps for progressing this in a comment or in the description, just sort of capturing the difficulty with existing PRs, and the suggestion that at some point, if we commit to this, we sort of lock down ambitious new PRs until after we've, done the modules moving. And yeah, we'll take it from there. I think I can have a high quality issue probably over the next couple of days, but my sleep's going to be out of whack tomorrow, so I'll see how we go before the weekend.
Well, we're a bunch of volunteers here, so we're not putting you under any time um, pressure. I think version 17 has been waiting for a couple of years now, and I don't think we need you to sacrifice any sleep making any additional.
And about your work as well, with the pure ESM stuff. This is something that I've deeply dedicated a huge chunk of my life, and have gone through a lot of different approaches, particularly publishing the GraphQL upload packages. I've done the dual, I've done the pure, I've done like a lot of that. So I'm very able and willing to sort of involve myself as well in the pure ESM topics moving forward.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I mean, we would appreciate help, up and down the repository, especially with that. I got some feedback from Lens in particular. I mean, what I was trying to work on actually to solve was the development and production checks in our instance. That sort of got intertwined with the ESM pull request. My plan is gonna be to integrate his feedback, which was very helpful in actually simplifying, and then I'll put up a PR and I guess I'll try to ping you on that. Either by GitHub, is that the best way, or by Discord or some other method, or email?
Yeah, GitHub's okay. You can like Twitter direct message me is how some people kind of reach out for open source direct messaging. Um,
Okay, I'll try GitHub first. I'll try GitHub first. I don't know if I've ever sent a Twitter direct message, although I do have an account. So I don't want to mess that up and send it to everyone. Just all right, that shows how much of a Luddite I am, despite being on ostensibly. Okay, so with that, I think I want to thank everyone for coming. Unless is there something anybody else wants to add? Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming, for joining, for your continued love showing to GraphQL and GraphQL JS. Thanks to Benji for who had to leave early, and we'll see you hopefully next time with exciting discussion. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.
See you.